Welcome back to the video series for Sir Heroscape's Champions Circle League Qualifier number 3. This is the final episode in the series where I'll look back at my army's performance and then look at the other armies from the event and give some final thoughts on the overall meta and the tournament as a whole. If you haven't watched the other videos in this series, I suggest doing that first, as I'll be referencing several of those videos and those games throughout this one. So I had a bit of an underwhelming showing this event. I finished at 3-2 after starting off at 1-2. I ran Maledrix, Festering Honor Guard, and Greatbow Archers X3, which I still think is the best army in this format, to be honest. I had convincing wins against 2 Gallery builds and a super close win against a Q11 Halusha Knaves build to go with a convincing loss to the Icenix build and a close loss to the Gallery, in a game that I honestly misplayed pretty hard. Based on that 5-game sample, I'm reasonably convinced that my build is a substantial favorite into Gallery in this meta, though I think that that would change if this was a 24-figure limit instead of a 20-figure limit, for what that's worth. The Icenix matchup is probably one of the worst for me, though I still think it's reasonably close to a 50-50 game, as Greatbows are usually going to get the chance to get some big shots in on Iron Lich, and I think that that matchup is frequently going to look like a blowout in one direction or the other, depending on how those Greatbow shots into Lich go. I didn't get the chance to play into the pure Greatbows army, the Greatbows X6 build, so I don't really have any data to update my assumptions on how that matchup would go. Let's move on to the overall standings for the event. First off, congratulations to OG Blaha, who took down this one with a 5-0 record, with the same army that I ended up running. We were the only 2 people who ran this particular build, and it went 8-2 overall, which is much more impressive than my standalone 3-2 record with it. OG and me actually played no common opponents, so the army ended up playing 10 of the other 11 players in the event, with Vexonia being the only player who didn't play into it. So some further data there to back up my belief in the overall strength of it into the meta as a whole. There was one other Greatbow build, with Sir Heroscape running Greatbows X6 and finishing at 2-3. He lost to OG Blaha, Darkleaf, and Dicel, and then beat Roguescaper and had one of the buys. There's actually only one Gallery build in that list that Sir H played, Darkleaf's. I do think that's the worst matchup for pure Greatbows, though, as their max 2 attacks per turn can just get outclassed so quickly by 4 attacks per turn, and Gallery's movement ability lets them close the gap and catch the Greatbows pretty quickly. Speaking of Gallery, there were 6 Gallery builds, with 1 5x iteration, 4 4x iterations, and 1 3x iteration. The 3x iteration was the only Gallery build to finish with a losing record, which makes sense to me, as Gallery are quite strong overall in this field, but 3x isn't really enough to capitalize on their strengths, which is moving more units in the first few rounds for free, and then overwhelming higher quality units with sheer numbers after that. Mega Silver's Gallery build finished 2-2 after dropping in round 5, and the other 4 builds all finished with a winning record. Interestingly, there was no fully duplicated Gallery build. 3 used Iwashia, while 2 used Krakenling for their movement bonding power, and the last build had Adelburn as a solo non-bonding piece. 2 of the Gallery builds found good use for Raylan 4.0, with those being the only 2 armies that Raylan was brought with, but to good results, with a 6-3 overall record between those 2 builds. Definitely a good showing for the Gallery overall, though I do still think that it's a meaningful underdog to the Maledrix plus Greatbow combo, as was evident from the 5-1 record the build had into Gallery. Next up, we see 2 different iterations of the Icenix build, both with Iron Lich, Scav, and 1x Acolytes, with Swarm going with the more standard Wraith Riders option, and Dicel going with the more techy Exiles plus Deflectocron option. Dicel's swapping of Wraith Riders for Exiles is interesting, because Exiles are definitely a good piece into Greatbows specifically, while Wraith Riders can't use Chain Grab there because of the Greatbow's size. I'm not sure how the 2 different versions do into Gallery, as I didn't get a chance to see any of those matchups play out, but Dicel finished 3-2 and Swarm finished 2-3. Icenix went 1-1 collectively against the Maladrix plus Greatbow build, with Swarm beating me and OG Blaha beating Dysel. Icenix went 2-3 against Gelry overall. The final two builds were more hero-centric builds, and their results are more indicative that the game was misnamed and should have been named Squadscape instead of Heroscape. It's just hard for heroes-only builds to match the efficiency of commons, especially now that there are a few strong common squad options out there in the contemporary meta that are arriving with the October release. So, Maladrix is good. Newsflash. Gelry and Greatbows are pretty good too, unsurprisingly. In terms of maps, I played on E-Road twice, Atacama, Rocky Top, and Halucia's Grove once, and did not play on Cultivation or Solitude. E-Road was the two games where I didn't play against Gelry, so both times I faced a more hero-centric army on it. There are definitely some good hero perches there, both for single and double hexed heroes. Didn't stand out too much to me beyond that, though. Atacama was a great map for Gelry, especially when their opponents set up their start zone badly, like I did, and let them have 4-5 defense the whole game. It has a pretty bumpy middle of the map, though. I'm glad I didn't have to try to traverse it in my game. I imagine Melee without some kind of Gelry-like movement power would struggle to cross it into any kind of solid ranged build. Rocky Top has a weird road where it felt like it's more useful for lateral movement than crossing the map left to right. The Glyph combo this time was absurdly strong for my build, though, with Ulanivia and Dagmar. To be honest, I don't think that Ulanivia should be included for contemporary events, as it's not that helpful for most armies, like Gelry, or any heroes that rely on their special attack primarily, and then it's just stupid good for something like Maladrix with Festering Honor Guard. So the matchup variance there is probably just a little bit too high for me to want it included in a meta like this. Halucia's Grove is a little less bumpy than Atacama was, which is a good thing in my book, and seemed like a solid map. Nothing especially stood out to me on it, though, beyond that. That's my recap of the event, including the army that I ran. Thanks to Sir Heroscape for running it. If you're interested in playing in the next one, there'll be one more CCL Qualifier later this year, before the end-of-year event. Thanks for watching, and until next time.